Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share 3 Thrifty Box die set ideas using the Thrifty Box die as well as the Thrifty Box Elements die. That's a companion die that has different ways that you can decorate and enhance your Thrifty Box once you've created it. So I'm going to start off with creating a Thrifty Box. I just die cut a piece of cardstock, whatever color you want. Obviously, it'll work with whatever color you need to use. So this die creates the bottom of the box. And if you want to create a top of the box, you use the same die set, but you adjust it a little bit. You trim off some different pieces, which I'll show you in just a minute. I'm using some forest cardstock here. This is a discontinued one from Spellbinders. It's a nice dark green. I will link somewhat similar colors in the description or in my supply list. They're not going to be the same ones because, like I said, this is a discontinued one, but it works perfect for this. It's a nice heavy cardstock, and I always love using Spellbinders cardstocks. I use them for a lot of things. And actually, I really quite miss this color. I always loved using it for the holidays. So after doing my die cutting, what I like to do before I do any assembly to the box is I like to reinforce those score lines. There's a bunch of score lines that get pressed into that cardstock while you die cut it. So I fold each one of them and then use a bone folder in order to reinforce it, making sure that it has a nice sharp score to it. And then after I'm done that, I will use some liquid glue here. I'm using Barely Art glue with a fine line bottle. I put some glue on the outer tabs and then a little bit of glue on the inner tab just to secure that nice in place. Now you do see those tabs on the inside of the box. If you wanted, you could cut a piece of cardstock to insert and glue in there and cover that. I don't mind seeing those tabs there. So this is how you adjust the die cut for creating a lid. So you're going to cut the tabs off of the two ends. So there's just one tab on the outside of each edge of that square in the center. And then after cutting those tabs off, you're going to kind of indent those tabs that are left on there a little bit. You're just going to make sure that they're not straight with that score line. They're just trimmed just a little bit at an angle. So this way, when you go put them in the box, they will fit in the box and you don't have the two edges of cardstock basically fighting with each other. It is a tight fit to put it into the box simply because it's exactly the same size. That square is exactly the same size as the bottom, but it does work, and it works perfect for holiday gift boxes, which I'm going to be doing for these first two. I'm going to decorate them with a bit of a holiday theme. So I have some sage cardstock here. This is another discontinued one that I have die cut the tree from the nested tree frame die set. This is a Spellbinders die that Lisa Horton created, and the Thrifty Box dies are from Lisa Horton Crafts. So I wanted to use just a bunch of her dies to do the decorating. So I ink blended it with a little bit of anthracite matte blending ink. Now anthracite, when you look at the pad, it looks like it's black, but it has like a really dark green tone to it. So it's perfect. It blends perfectly with that forest cardstock. And again, it works perfect for trees and greenery. So I used that anthracite at the bottom part of each one of these die cuts for the tree, trying not to go too far up. I wanted to make sure that you could see a little bit of that sage die or sage cardstock towards the top, but I always love how ink blending just gives it a little bit of visual dimension to it. There's some snow edge pieces that I have die cut out of just plain white cardstock. I'm going to be adding stickles to them to add some glitter to it, but you could just die cut glitter cardstock if you wanted to. Now there is a trunk to this tree that I didn't die cut. I wasn't really thinking about it when I was doing my die cutting. I don't think it necessarily looks bad without it. I don't have it on here, but if you think it looks odd without having a trunk, you can absolutely add it. For the star at the top, I used just a scrap of cardstock that I had left over from some solid hot foiling, and it was done out of the Aura foil, so it has a gold tone to it, but it's holographic shine, which worked perfect for that star at the top. I'm also going to be using that same cardstock for the inside of these poinsettias. So these are die cut with the All Year in Bloom die set. I have them die cut out of some periwinkle cardstock, another discontinued color. I chose a bunch of discontinued colors for this because I have them left over and I kind of miss creating with some of them. So the poinsettias are done with periwinkle cardstock. The leaves are done with the sage cardstock. And yes, the leaves are die cut out of the same large die that the poinsettia is die cut out of. But when you go glue them together, you just offset them so it looks like leaves. Now you'll have leaves in every space between the poinsettia petals. You could always cut some of them off if you don't want to have quite that many leaves. I have one layer of the larger poinsettia, one layer of the smaller one. If you want yours to be a little bit fuller, you could do multiple layers. I only wanted to do one layer of each because I didn't want it to overtake the top of the box. The center of those poinsettias are once again done out of that solid hot foiled scrap, and I just flashed it into the screen for just a moment. I already made this box off screen because it's exactly the same as the first box. The process is exactly the same. And I also die cut it out of that forest cardstock. Will be perfect for holiday gift boxes. And these, they are about 3 by 3 as a finished size. So they would be fun just for adding different little trinkets for gifts. And you could use them as stocking stuffers as well. Or just a little, just a tiny little gift that you want to give someone. It's fun that you can take them and you can personalize them. And it's a nice challenge because the top of the box is 3 by 3 size. A challenge to find things to decorate the top with that will fit within that frame. So I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of stickles on the stamen of the center of that poinsettia just to add a touch of sparkle to it, and then set it off to the side. Now, the one thing that I forgot to mention while I was creating it is I ink blended those with color shift inks. The green was avocado gold and the purple was golden heather. And that way, when the flower was done and you tilt it in the light, both the leaves as well as the petals have a little bit of gold shimmer to them. So for the next idea with a Thrifty Box die set, I'm going to create another box. Actually, I'm going to do the box off screen because once again, it's the same as the first one. I die cut it out of white this time just so it had a bit of different color variation. But this is going to be a box that has some small note cards in them. So I thought this would be a fun idea as a little gift for someone that you don't necessarily need to spend a lot on a gift, someone that doesn't necessarily need anything, but you just wanted to give them a thank you, or I'm thinking of you, or whatever gift. I thought this would be a fun way to use it. So this is the top of the box. The elements, the floral, the greenery, as well as the square and pinking edged square are all from the Thrifty Box Element die set. The box itself is from the Thrifty Box die set. And they're all done in the same colors as my previous one. So the dark green is forest cardstock, the light green is sage cardstock, and we have 2 tones of purple here. I'm using both that periwinkle that I've already used, and I'm also adding in some royal amethyst just to add a little bit of color difference between the purples. For these cards, I'm not doing any ink blending on them because the florals are really quite tiny. You could do it on that curved leaf piece, but I thought I would keep them fairly simple and just glue the die cuts on straight. I just didn't want to do any ink blending in really, really tiny areas. Now, the sentiments that I'm going to be using are from the Sending Smiles stamp and die set, as well as the Very Best Wishes stamp and die set. These are both stamp and die sets from Spellbinders that Lisa Horton has created, and I'm only using the sub-sentiments. So the ones that I actually use are ones that I have created for previous projects. Anytime I have extras, I just save them in a Ziploc bag, and I'm just using them up with this project here. I have a piece of cardstock trimmed down to 5.5 inches by 2 3/4 inches. I score it at the 2 3/4 inch mark. Now you can see with my scoreboard, I don't have a 2 3/4 inch score groove. So what I do is I move the end of my cardstock, the left end of my cardstock, up to the 1/4 inch mark, and then I score it at the 3 inch mark, which equals the 2 3/4 inches. Fold it in half, and when I fold it in half and reinforce that score line, and do it in the corner of my score pal so that I can make sure that all of those edges are all lined up. I did 5 of them off screen. Just that one is done on screen here so that you can see exactly how I created each one of these note cards. And once again, the layers as well as the greenery and florals are from the Thrifty Box Elements die set. I'm going to create 6 cards total. I'm going to do 2 of each design. So there's going to be the design is exactly the same, but I'm just going to add different sentiments to them because I have a bunch of sentiments that are all done, ready to go, and I'm just using them up. They're not going to be exactly the same, but that's a great way to make it a little bit easier when designing cards or tiny note cards, but add variation is just change up the sentiment a little bit. Now, some of the sentiments from that Sending Smiles or Very Best Wishes set are just a little bit too long for these cards, so I'm not using them. I'm only focusing on the ones that are shorter and the ones that will work on these note cards. So I have the greenery here. I have them die cut out of the forest cardstock as well as the sage. The larger leaf set, I just did 1 with that dark green. And then I had 3 of each of the smaller ones. The smaller ones almost look like lavender stems, but they're all die cut out of green. I had 3 for each card die cut, but I end up only using 2 because I figured that third one was going to be just too much and cover too much of that dark green. Then I add my sentiment to the front. These are the sets that these sentiments are from. And once again, they're just the sub-sentiments. So these are the ones that are the stamps that have a coordinating die to die cut them out. So they're going to be stamped with a bit variation of different inks. I think these ones were done with a gray ink. Some of them are done with a black ink, and some of them are done with anthracite ink. I wasn't too worried about exactly the right color of ink or them all being the same, just as long as they coordinated or worked well with the backgrounds of the cards. To add just a touch of sparkle, I'm using a dot of stickles on the edges of the lavender looking stems. This doesn't add any color. I use Stardust stickles. It just adds a bit of sparkle and a bit of texture. So I do those and I set those aside so they can dry while I'm creating the next set of cards. So for this set, I have my largest matte die cut out of the forest cardstock, the next size down, which with the decal edge or the pinking sheer edge on it, is die cut out of the sage cardstock. And then I added an inner one to this one that is die cut out of the classic white cardstock, just to give it a brighter look in the center. I also wanted to make sure that my greenery was going to show off on that background. So by having that white in the center, I can ensure that. So because of the sizes of these pieces, these would be great opportunities to use up a ton of different cardstock scraps and give them some good use. And I'm just using regular plain cardstock for this, but you could add printed papers to it. Specialty cardstocks for some of the layers would be great. You could also even ink blend on some of the edges of the cardstock if you wanted to add a little bit of color variation, or if you wanted to use some of the color shift or interference inks to add a little bit of shimmer to them. That would be a great way to elevate it as well. For this card, I'm using the curved pieces of the greenery. For the front of my box, I only used 1. For these, I'm using 2 for each card to create a wreath, and I will lay my sentiment right across it and then just enhance it with the flowers. Now I'm using the same color tones with all of these, but obviously you can use whatever color palette you want, and it's just a great way, again, to use up a bunch of different cardstock scraps, use up a bunch of different sentiments that you already have left over from previous projects. I'm doing this as a note card set, but you could always just give these note cards. You could also use these squares from the front of these as different squares on the front of a larger card if you wanted to create a larger card that, say, looked a little bit like a quilt or that had some color blocking or something to it. That would be a great way to use it as well. So once I have those sentiments on there, I can glue my flowers together. These, once again, are done with the Periwinkle and Royal Amethyst cardstock, just layered together. I'm using the darker color towards the bottom of the flower, the lighter color for the smaller top flower, and then the darker color in the center of the flower again. I once again plan on putting some stickles in the center of the flower just to add that little bit of sparkle. But if you wanted some color variation to the center of that flower, you could use a different color cardstock or even that holographic gold negative foil piece that I used for the center of the poinsettia, or the tree star would be great for the center of these flowers as well. I kept it very simple by just adding a single flower to these. Again, there's not a lot of space. The big base of the card is 2 3/4 inches by 2 3/4. So these are really tiny pieces to decorate. I also didn't want to add too many layers to it and have it be too thick to fit all 6 of the cards in the box. What I end up needing to do is alternating where the fold of the card is. So on one layer it's on the left side and one, the next card, it's on the right side, just to make sure that that stack is nice and even, to make sure that the lid goes on properly. I'm doing 6 cards here. You could easily just do 4 if you wanted to, if you wanted to have a little bit less in that box and have all of the folded sides of your card on the same side. For this third set of cards, I have the greenery. I'm still doing the wreath here, but I have it die cut of that lighter green, the sage cardstock, just for a little bit of color variation once again. And there's different flowers in the Thrifty Box Element die set. I used the larger round flower for the last one. For this one, I'm using, they're kind of like a plus sign. So once again, I have the larger back or bottom flower done with the darker of the purples, the middle or the top one done with the lighter of the purples. Now, as I was gluing this together, I thought, wouldn't that be cool to do a bunch of these and do a background with this? It just creates a really cool design. And it would definitely be a labor of love because it would take a lot of these flowers to cover a background, but I think it would look really, really cool. There's also some smaller, thinner flowers here that I have done the same thing to. The bottom flower is the dark purple. The next layer up is the lighter purple, and I'm just offsetting them. And they have a little bit of kind of a cross look to them. The flowers end up looking a little bit more square than they do round, but if you wanted them to be a little bit rounder, once again, you could do double layers of each one of these. Again, I didn't do that because I didn't want my flowers to be too dimensional to be able to fit into that box. Off screen, I picked a couple more of the sentiments, and once again, choosing the sentiments that are going to fit within the base of that card. You don't want to pick anything that's too big or larger than the outsides of the card because they won't fit into that box. I'm going to glue down the larger of the flowers first, and then I'm going to tuck in the smaller of the flowers. So I'm going to tuck one in below or beside that larger flower, and then the other one is going to go on top of my sentiment, just to give it a little bit of variation from the last card. And it's got variation anyways because the flowers are different, but by adding 3 flowers to it, again, it just fills it in a little bit more. Once again, I'm just going to add stickles in the center of the flowers. This again is not going to add any color to it. It's just going to add that sparkle and that texture. So I'm going to sit these aside and let them dry completely. I end up letting them dry an hour, but because they're only dots of stickles, you really don't need to let them dry quite as long as that, but you do want to make sure that they are 100% dry before you stack them together and insert them in your box. So by having the top of the box decorated as well, it kind of gives you a hint as to what is in the box here. So this time here, I did it where all of the folds were on the same side, and you can see when I have my lid on there that the left side of that lid is just a little bit raised. You can press it down to have it even, but I just found it fit a little bit better if I alternated where the folds of the card is. So for this next project, I wanted to change up this box. So this box creates a square box. I wanted to create a rectangle one, but it's not going to be the same type of box that I've just created. It's not going to have a lid to it. So I have a piece of cardstock here. This is 5 inches by 11 inches. So it's the length of an 8.5 by 11 cardstock, but it's just trimmed to 5 inches. I put my die on that piece of cardstock, taping one end in place, but when I put my upper plate on it, I pull the upper plate so that it's not covering the bottom score line for that box. So it's not going to score that bottom part there. Then I reline up that die with the score in that cardstock, and you can feel where that score is. I slide it down as far as it will go, tape the die in place, and now when I go to put my plate on top of it, I'm going to not have the plate covering the opposite side of that box. So it's only going to cut the bottom side of that box. So what we're really doing is we're extending the base of that box. So again, it's not going to be the square that we've just been making. It's going to be a rectangle. Technically, you could do the same technique to create the top of the box if you wanted to. However, it's a little bit harder to make sure that that box top would be the right size. So for this, what I'm creating is kind of a shadow box card. It's just completely different from any other ones that I've done. So it'll have a box front to it, and I will create a base because I want to make sure that this can stand up nicely without creating a base to it or a back to it. It's back heavy and it will just flop over it won't stand up properly, and that will make a little bit more sense as I decorate it. Before I assemble my box, I do the same thing as I did for that first one. I reinforce every single score line that's there to make sure that I have a nice, sharp, and crisp score line. Then I use my Barely Art glue in that fine bottle and glue the flaps as well as that inner flap in place. Now, because this box is staying open and it's kind of a display card, those flaps on the inside are going to be covered, but they're not going to be covered with black cardstock. This base of this is black cardstock because I wanted it to be striking against what I put on the inside, but really you could do it out of whatever color you want. So here's that empty box. I even tried to stand it up by itself as is, and it was still a little bit too back heavy, so it wouldn't stand on its own just as a box like this. So next step, I want to take the Butterfly Silhouettes press plate, and I'm going to foil it with some Prism foil. This is similar to that gold that I've been using for the centers of the flowers and the star top, but this is silver with a holographic finish to it. I foil the detailed plates of the Butterfly Silhouettes, as well as the love or sentiment, as well as the sub sentiments. So I have a bunch of pieces foiled here. I'm also going to do the solid hot foiling. I always do this when I am foiling. Rather than storing the excess of the foil, I always solid hot foil it, because even if I'm not going to use it on the project, it's much easier to store that cardstock with the foil already on it and save it for future projects. Sometimes I use them as mats, sometimes I use them as the shapes that they are, and sometimes I use them to die cut pieces for other things. So that's what I was doing with the star top as well as the center of the poinsettias. I was using a piece that I wasn't going to be used, or I didn't have, or I had left over from a card. So after doing that foiling, I'm going to tape my dies in place. I just used some Best Ever Craft tape to make sure that those dies aren't going to move on me. And I'm going to die cut both of the Butterfly Silhouettes as well as that love sentiment and my sub sentiments. Now my sub sentiments are actually a little bit close to the paper edge. So there's one that I wanted to use, but it has a straight edge to it rather than the curved edge of the die cut. It'll be used on the inside of my card, and I hide that edge. What I could do if I wanted to see the entire sentiment is I could reuse the die that coordinates with it, just shift that piece over a little bit, so then I could curve those edges, but I opt not to do that. So here, after die cutting my solid hot foil pieces, I have one of each to choose when I'm creating. So sometimes when I'm creating, the regular foiled piece is going to look better, and sometimes the solid hot foiled piece is just going to be a little bit more striking, or get the look that I'm going for just a little bit better. So it's always fun to have both of those to choose from while I'm creating. For the background, for the inside of this card front, I'm going to be using the script text press plate. This is another one from Lisa Horton that she did for Spellbinders. I'm using the BetterPress cardstock, but I'm not using any ink. I only want the texture of this plate here. I don't necessarily want any ink on there. I'm not doing any technique to resist anything. I just want that texture. So it's similar-ish to a embossed background, but it is different. The press plates have so much detail to them that it gives a different look to it. So while with having my box in place there, I'm measuring it and cutting down this press plate background piece so that I can fit it in there. And if you by chance you wedge it in there and it's just a little bit too big and doesn't want to come out, you can use your die pick to poke it out. That totally helps. Now, once I have it the right size, I can ink blend that background. So I don't actually remember what the size it ended up being, but if you're creating this project, just measure your pieces and measure it so that it fits nicely in there. I have 4 different matte blending inks that I'm using on the background here. So this first color here is Painted Eggshell. It's a really, really light blue. So I'm going to do blues towards the top of this piece, greens towards the bottom, but I'm starting with the lighter of the colors. So this lighter one of the blue is the Painted Eggshell. I'm going to use Garden Stage for the lighter of the greens. And then for the darker of the greens, I'm going to pull out that anthracite again. And for the darker of the blues, I'm going to be using some Tranquil Waters. So I'm not interested in getting a lot of ink on this background. I want it to be a light background. I want my pieces that are foiled for the front of my card to be the focal point. This is just to add a little bit of color to the background. It also brings out that texture of that press plate background. So it creates a really unique and cool look. So next I'm doing that anthracite for the bottom there. And once again, I'm not trying to make it really dark, but I do want to have some color variation. And then I'm going to do the tranquil waters for the top. And just, I always love when it's a little bit darker towards the top and then towards the bottom, just to give it a little bit of visual dimension. So at this point, I'm pretty sure which butterflies I'm going to be using for the front of my card, but I'm not sure. I want to give myself room if I change my mind while I'm creating. So I'm going to color these with interference inks. I'm starting off with Opal Blush here. This is a blue color that has a little pink shimmer to it. And then I'm going in with the Lavender Fields. This one is purple and it has a green shimmer to it. Now, the interference inks don't blend quite as well as the color shift inks. The color shift inks are creamier. The interference inks are not as creamy. They dry quite quickly. They're not intended for blending, but the way I fake it is I start where I want my color darkest, and then I blend a little bit out as there's less and less ink on my brush, and it kind of gives you the look of ink blending two colors, but you really didn't because there was just less ink to put on there. And I just keep doing this until I get the look that I want, or I get a nice looking transition between the two colors. Now that foil is going to resist the ink. However, you do want to make sure to use just a clean paper towel to wipe it, just so that if there's any residue of that ink left on that foil, it will wipe it off. That way you don't get it on your fingers while you're creating. I'm also going to ink blend my love sentiment here, as well as a couple of the sub sentiments that I plan on using. So for the love one, I'm using that pink champagne as well as the Lavender Fields. The Lavender Fields is going towards the bottom of it. I just like the look of kind of an ombre look to it. It gives it a little bit more interest to it. And here I'm using that clean paper towel just to wipe them off. There's not a ton of ink left there, but there is some, so I want to make sure that there's none left on there. For the sub-sentiments here, I'm using that Opal Blush, and it really makes the letters stand out. When you do the prism foil against the white, it's beautiful, but it doesn't stand out quite as much as it does once you've inked it. So now that I have all of my pieces ready here, I can start to assemble. So I'm going to glue the back to this box first, and then I'm going to add 2 of the butterflies. Now, in all honesty, these would be better with butterflies that are slightly smaller, but I really wanted to use Lisa Horton dies, press plates, that sort of thing. And this was the smallest of the butterflies that I have of hers. They work, but they are, in my opinion, just slightly crowded on the inside. But I love the fact that they were press plates that could be foiled. It just adds so much visual dimension to it. So I add that love towards the bottom, then the open butterfly, and then the side butterfly towards the top. When I add them, I bend them so that I only glue down the butterfly bodies. Since this is a box and we have all of this area to fill in, it just looks nicer, in my opinion, to have that dimension and have that filled in. Now, obviously, this isn't a card you're going to be putting in an envelope. This is something that you would hand to someone because of that dimension, or else you'd have to give it to someone in a box because of that dimension. So because of the uniqueness, I just wanted to fill it in with something unique. This would also look fantastic with some flower die cuts with a bunch of dimension to them as well. For the back of this card, I made a base using a piece of cardstock that was 3 inches by 9.5 inches, and I scored that at 4 3/4 to create a top folding card. Then I created an inner white piece for that card that is 2 3/4 by 4.5 inches. That way you can write on the inside of this card and actually be able to see it. To add some of those foiled pieces to the inside of the card just kind of brings or ties in the front of the card to the inside of that card. And then I'm going to glue this to the back. Now, the reason for this is because this box is back heavy, and if you were to try to stand it up, it would just flop over or would have to be leaned up against something. So with that back of the card, it gives you a space to write a message to someone. And it also helps it to stand up on its own so it doesn't need to lean against something or it doesn't fall over. To add just a touch more dimension or texture to the insides here, I'm using some dots of stickles on the outer dots of those butterfly wings. And then I'm also going to use some glossy accents on the butterfly bodies. Now, again, those 2 steps don't need to be done, but I always love the different textures that they give. And I think, in my opinion, it really finishes the pieces off because it just adds a bit of variation. So we have the texture of the back of our card with that press plate piece that is ink blended. And then we have that beautiful foil from the butterflies, the shimmer from those interference inks, as well as the stickles and glossy accents texture on those butterflies. Again, this is just something that is unique and would be fun for a special someone. I wouldn't be making a ton of these for a ton of people, but just someone that would appreciate it and that basically loves displaying different things. Then we have our box with note cards. This would be a great gift or a great thank you to someone, little stocking stuffer, someone that loves to use cards or note cards and uses them often. This is a perfect gift for them and a great way to use up a ton of different scraps. The lid does come off fairly easy. I was struggling with it that moment there. It just wanted to not come off. Here I've got those cards in there, and this time I do have them so that the folds of the card are on opposite sides. So some of those cards will be upside down when you first see them, have to be flipped over. But this is a great way just to create something. I loved creating on a different scale from A2 cards. I typically will do A2 cards, so sometimes it's a fun challenge to do a different scale and a fun different way to give a gift. Then we have our holiday gift boxes that you can easily add little trinkets, little doodads. Sometimes it's fun having the challenge of finding things to fit into small boxes, and those would be perfect for stocking stuffers. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.